in terms of, helping lads understand what the skill sets are, how that can be transferred, making sure that we're doing the relevant things to just broaden our horizons and just understand that, even if you play till mid-30s, rugby's still the smaller part of your life by the time you kind of call it a day. You'll live more of your life not playing rugby than you will playing rugby.
Welcome to episode 3 of Chapters. This week we have Will Fraser. Will is a former rugby union player for Saracens who contributed to the historic 2015-2016 European and Premiership Double winning team. Will decided to stop playing rugby due to a neck injury, and since then he started his own company, 101st. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Will Fraser. So I want to talk more about 101st down the line, but let's talk about, obviously, you're a former rugby player. When did rugby start becoming serious for you? When did it was an option for it to be a career?
To be honest, from 8 years old.
Really?
So yeah, I was one of those kids that I was quite a big kid. So my mum always used to say I had loads of loose muscle, which obviously it wasn't. So rugby suited me from quite an early age, and I just loved it. So I was very fortunate. Kind of the second I picked up a ball, the decision was almost made for me and what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So everything I did from that point kind of geared towards hopefully turning it into a job, and my family obviously were hugely supportive in that. And I'm one of 4 boys, and we were all into our sport, so we were all being ferried kind of all over the country doing our various bits. So yeah, my parents were pretty fundamental in helping on that journey. And then got picked up by Sarries at 14, kind of put into the junior academy there with quite a stellar kind of group of players, and then by hook or by crook managed to convince them to give me a contract when I was 18 and left school. And then
very modest. Something I found about athletes is they don't want to big themselves up when they've done something quite kind of you got a contract. That's huge for someone like myself who's not an athlete. To get a contract as a professional is it's fucking amazing. And then when I speak to a lot of athletes, they're kind of somehow got a contract. It's it's probably because you're very talented, But just going into that you say you got picked up at 14. How does that happen?
Yeah.
Was it through your club or was it through school?
So I suppose picked up maybe is the wrong terminology. So when I think it's different now, but when I was coming through with the lads I was coming through with, essentially, and by the way, your assertion about kind of how rugby's played is right. It still is predominantly an independent school sport, which is probably one of the problems it has in terms of the growth of it here in the UK. Is that it's not in enough kind of state-funded schools, but that's a different conversation. So each club essentially had a catchment area that they could kind of select academy players from. So Saracens being where they're based, kind of in North London, the counties they could pick from was Hertfordshire, Essex, and Kent. Okay. So what would happen at under 14 level is essentially each county would put forward their 10 best players into the junior setup at the club. And then once you were in that, it was then at the discretion of the club whether you stayed on, whether they kind of let you go. So once you're in that setup, it was kind of Tuesday and Thursday nights after school. And you had I was in Hertfordshire. I played for Hertfordshire, so I was born in Watford. So at the time when I was born, Saracens were playing at Vicarage Road.
Vicarage Road, yeah.
And I was born at Watford General, so I was kind of attached to the
Yeah.
So it was as local can be. But yeah, so once you're in, it was you had kids being driven up from the depths of Kent, as far east as you can go in Essex, to then come and play at the time
on a winter night. Yeah.
This is it, right? And you've just had school, and then parents have jobs, and so it's a big ask. And then you had this revolving door, so you'd have you turn up one Tuesday night, and there'd be 30 of you there. The next week there might be 20. The following week there's 35. So you just had this kind of constant conveyor belt, and then there was a core group of us that, I say, were able to kind of stick it out and did enough to get contracts when we left school at 18 years old, and then that then kind of.
Are you talking about this group of kind of the Jamie George Cruz?
Yeah,
obviously it's the group. Jackson Ray.
That's it. Yeah. So obviously there was more than the 5 of us that kind of got given contracts at 18 to the what was then called kind of the senior academy, when it becomes your job, right? So you leave school, suddenly you're into, I hesitate to say it, full-time employment, because it's awesome. So, I don't want people to think like, you're 18 and you're straight into like, grafting, and grafting, but grafting is something we love doing.
Yeah.
So we had a group, I think probably around 10 or 12 of us, and then like with anything in life, people move on. Some people just, the club wasn't right. Yeah, but various reasons why it ended up being kind of 5 of us that stayed on, and then I finished at 27 because of injuries. So then that went down to 4. George is now finished. Jackson's now finished, and kind of we're working together now, which is great. So, but that group to come through and see what those guys were able to go on and achieve is just insane. To be part of that.
What was it like? Because I looked at the squad of Saracens when you kind of broke into the squad and kind of nailed it. Not maybe a full-time place, but kind of you were starting to kind of assert your position. There were some big names in the squad. Like John Smith was in the squad, and I think, is it Jack Berger?
Yeah.
And you got Jim Hamilton there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you're proper. I'm not saying you weren't an adult, but I feel like I've only just become an adult the last few years. So as a young lad who's 20, 21, was it kind of a bit daunting coming into this squad of men, or were you just ready?
Well, it was interesting because Sarries had always had some pretty stellar names. So I remember in the junior academy, kind of pre-2009, we had people like Justin Marshall, Chris Jack, these guys that have got 50 to 100 caps for the All Blacks. We had some insane, Thomas Castagnered, Tim Horan, way before my time. Obviously Francois Pienaar played for the club, so the club's always had these kind of big names. And then there was this big change to the club. The first year we got given our contracts. So Eddie Jones was actually head coach of the club at the time. He gave us our contracts at 18. He then left, and a guy called Brendan Venter came, and he kind of just overhauled the club entirely. So when we first started, actually the club went the complete other way, and didn't have any, and I do in inverted commas because the guys we had were phenomenal, but they weren't necessarily kind of household names at the time. And as we got better and better, you're right, by the time I hit 2021, 22, all of a sudden, we're attracting these incredible players with huge notoriety in the sport. So I was a massive rugby nose as a kid, right? So, when Steve Borthwick was the first captain I played under, when he joined the club, he was England captain. And I remember being like in an academy weight session, and he came in and he introduced himself to all of us as if we had no idea who he was. And you kind of like, and John was the same. When John joined the club, World Cup winning captain for the Springboks, over 100 caps, and he comes in and he's like, "Hi guys, I'm John." And in your head you go, "No, don't worry, I know." But you go, "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Will." And then we had a South African lad in our group at the time, and he kind of shat his pants because he's like, my wall at home when I was a kid was just John, pictures of John type thing. So it was cool. But I think if anything, as a group, I think the group I was part of, it sent us the other way. It's almost like knowing that you're in amongst that kind of player actually gives a huge amount of confidence that you're able to be on a level with them where you can be you can actually add value to this team, and that people want you to be a part of it. And it's also huge learning, right? The amount you learn from how these guys train and how they operate, and what they're doing that no one else sees as from a youngster, or as a youngster, sorry, it's completely invaluable really to help us progress ourselves.
Do some of the kind of senior players, are they willing to, let's say they're coming towards the end of their career, are they quite willing to help out the younger players, almost like pass on their insights?
It's not even when they're coming towards the end, to be honest. The club was very, very forward thinking in terms of development of the academy. I think Saracens has always had this conveyor belt of amazing academy products. I think you look at the year we won the European Cup for the first time, the year we did the double, out of the 15 left on the pitch at the final whistle, I think 9 or 10 had come through our academy, which is a huge, and you look at the players now playing, so many have come through. So there's always been, and a huge part of that development is the ability for academy players to approach senior players and for senior players to be approachable, right? And actually go out of their way to sit down with lads and go through video footage, little pointers in training. And I know from my end, you had Jacques, as you mentioned. You had a guy called Justin Melk, Ernst Joubert, Skolkberger. Then although he's younger than me, you had someone like Billy, who's just a wealth of experience, far more than kind of I ever had. So you have Kelly Brown, another one. Kelly as well, was a huge one for me. I think what it was more indicative of is and I can only ever, I'll caveat everything I've said, I can only ever talk on behalf of Saracens because it's the only team I play for. So I can't, I'm not making assumptions that other teams don't do this, but I know that the team that I was fortunate to be part of was very proactive in all of these things. And there was an actual desire to want to do it, right? Because we're all kind of trying to pull towards the same thing. So if we don't help each other along the way, the only thing that gets hurt is us.
It seems like Saracens are quite active on preparing you for outside of the rugby or outside of your sporting career. How did they go about that with yourself when you were kind of coming towards the end? I mean, you retired early, or you stopped playing sport early compared to a lot of other people through injury. Well, how was that for you? I mean, it must have been quite a tough time.
It wasn't ideal. I'd kind of planned to still be playing now. I'm coming towards,
You're only mid-30s,
I think,
I'm 34.
Yeah, 34, though the bags on my eyes of two young kids probably make me look slightly older.
Don't know what my eyes use it.
Dora, you're slightly blurry on mine, so I can't see it. No, I think the thing is my career was very different to a lot of people's careers in the sense that you have this kind of spectrum of injuries players get, right? So you get some lads that can play till 35, even late 30s without as much to scratch. Most kind of sit in this middle bracket where they'll pick up a few operations along the way, a couple major ones, but then you get people like me down the other end who, struggle to piece together more than 5 or 6 games without ending up on the operating theatre. So I think I finished at 27 with like 10 operations and various other injuries and ailments over the way. I've had a couple posts playing as well. So I knew I probably wasn't going to have the career that I'd hoped I'd had as a kid, just by nature of my body just wasn't going to pull through to that extent. But I still thought I'd play longer. So I think probably I finished 27, so probably from about 24, 25, I started being a bit more proactive in terms of looking outside of the sport. And the club were great. We had a guy called, and he's still there, a guy called David Jones, club psychologist, who also runs all the personal development programs for the players, who again we do some work with now, but he's just phenomenal in terms of helping lads understand what the skill sets are, how that can be transferred, making sure that we're doing the relevant things to just broaden our horizons and just understand that, even if you play till mid-30s, rugby's still the smaller part of your life by the time you kind of call it a day. You'll live more of your life not playing rugby than you will playing rugby. So that there's... So they were very good in that. I still, to be honest with you, I didn't have a Scooby what I wanted to do because I'd always just thought about playing rugby. So my tactic or my plan was to basically try as many things as I could under the premise that I probably was going to hate it.
Oh, yeah.
So, I could cross it all off.
Yeah.
So if I cross enough things off, whatever's left, in theory, is what I'd want to do. So that was my plan. So I did some work experience at a law firm. I did the typical kind of city bits and insurance broking and that sort of world, and the theory was starting to work. I didn't like these things, so I started to cross them off the list. But then again, I'd finished kind of probably 3 years. My plan, my current contract, I was almost going to run out when I was 30. So the Saracens contract, sorry, yeah. So I literally just signed one. So my plan was right. The reality is that'll probably be about right in terms of calling it a day. So I've got another 3-4 years to go down this route. And then obviously it came a cropper a lot sooner. So, and then I just got given a brilliant opportunity by the club. So, as I said, the club was phenomenal in looking after us away from the sport. And so I was given the opportunity to jump over in the commercial arm and kind of kind of carry on this idea the club had of setting up this consultancy offering to our partners, to our sponsors. And I ran that for a couple of years. And that was, from a learning point of view, kind of going from chucking the ball around to living to suddenly basically being given a whole area of the commercial business to run. I think the first invoice I sent out was, I put the VAT at 17.5% because that's what it was when I did GCSE business studies. Yeah. I had no idea if I bumped up. So that got sent straight back. I think the first event I set up, the events guys at the stadium emailed me saying, do you want F&B for the event? Which is, now I know it's just food and beverage. I think my email reply was, I don't have a Facebook account. So, so I knew nothing. I knew zero. But so I got kind of told.
At least you kind of got yourself out there of you're getting that out of the way, aren't you? Kind of making mistakes and
this is it.
Learning from it.
This is it. And I had this wonderful grace period where people knew that I'd just finished playing rugby, so I probably wasn't the smartest tool in the shed. So people were very forgiving and very, willing to give me a crack and take a bit of a punt. And we built that side of the business up to something relatively substantial. And I say I'd learned everything from building the products to selling them to marketing them to delivering them. I was kind of the only one in that side of the business at the club. And then
there really was. It sounds like it was a business within a business. It sounds like it was a small business within Saracens.
Very much so, yeah. So it was kind of considered like a business unit within the commercial arm, if you like.
That's great experience.
Yeah, no, dude, it was from a learning point of view, it was insane. The learning curve was probably steeper than when I was playing rugby, because I had no idea about anything. So it was hugely valuable from that point of view. And then obviously the club got caught up in the salary cap dramas. Back in 2019, 2020. And then, when I was there, kind of the part of the club I was working for was essentially talking around the culture of the club and the performance impact it has. When the salary cap happened, although that has nothing to do with why the club got to where it got to, obviously the perception is very different. So, not even, I wouldn't even say overnight, within hours of that news being publicly released, I'd lost every single bit of business we had, and we're talking a decent amount, just because people have said that we just can't be seen to be associated, because which makes complete sense, right? And so the only thing I could go back to on that
is just reality in business.
This is it, right? I was like, I get it, let me try and kind of just give you clarity on what's actually happened, but I completely understand. So again, you talk about learning experience, dealing with building it, and then it literally kind of nosediving. That was hugely valuable as well. So I think those things combined, and then obviously COVID come in, and COVID in particular, I think just accelerated kind of, I'd had these plans of always eventually kind of doing something on my own, because I think when I look back at, I think what I was very fortunate to get was this really deep reflection period when I was running the Saracens consultancy business, of actually understanding, well, if I break down what I got from playing rugby that wasn't the rugby, how do I try and not replicate that, because you'll never replicate it. And I think that's a misconception. That's why a lot of sports people struggle when they finish, because they're trying to replicate, and you will never replicate that directly.
Yeah.
But it's how can I get as many of those same intrinsic drivers in something that isn't rugby. And for me, when I look at what I actually enjoyed about playing professional sport, it was the fact that you're learning every day, that I had to challenge my belief system. I had to challenge my own abilities if I wanted to play in a team, because that's the only way I get better. Yeah. Socially, I was interacting every single day, and I was fortunate to do it with people that I genuinely loved and I cared about, but I was interacting every day, and I was part of something that was meaningful and gave me kind of this sense of belonging. So I was thinking, well, where do I get that from now? And actually, when I kind of bottled it down, I thought, well, the reality is probably to start my own gig and building a team the team that I want to work with. So what COVID did then was just give me the
home office.
I did it probably. This is it, right? And I probably did it 5 years, maybe 5-10 years sooner than I'd.
Yeah, in a way you're lucky that it's you guys.
But 100%, and this is it, right? And I'm not, ironically, for my sins, like I'm not a spiritual guy by any sense. I'm probably as atheist as the Pope is Catholic. But if I believed in something, it's serendipity, and just putting yourself in a position, right? So this opportunity came. And I put myself in a position where I'd built up enough of a bank of knowledge, of understanding of how do you build these things. I was fortunate to build up a good enough network where I could kind of go to people and approach them and say, this is what I'm doing now. I'd love to talk to you about it. And then, we built that up now for 3 years. We also have a foundation. We started a year in working in prisons. There's 6 of us now across kind of the organisation, soon to be 7. And Jackson's now working with me again, which is mega, right? So it's, my dad always said, sorry, I'm on my soapbox here. My dad always said, when I finished early, probably more of a way of getting himself through it, more than getting me through it. But he kind of said, well, listen, you've got an opportunity to start something now that when all your mates finish, you can help them out when they finish. I always had that in the back of my mind, that how cool it'd be because obviously we're very close, so we always see each other and stay in touch, but how cool would it be if we could all work together again, just in a very different capacity? So the fact that Jack is now doing some bits with us is mega. It's awesome.
Well, let's get into the 101st then. So, we touched on before that you're going to America and it is a consultancy business, yeah?
Yes, yeah. So
let's say I'm a company and I've heard about your services, but I'm not 100% sure like what you can do to improve my company. Tell me what you actually offer to a business.
So the business side of it is, I suppose we'd fall under the management consultancy kind of big umbrella, which we always try and really pull ourselves out from, because we're not management consultants, because there's a lot of baggage that comes with saying that you're one of them. So I suppose technically we're a people and culture consultancy is kind of, I suppose, what we label the business as. But essentially what we do is we help teams. So the way we kind of approach it is very much that we cannot directly help anyone be better at their job. Right, we can't do that because I've never done your job. We've never worked in your company. There's so many things we don't know. And actually, in many ways, what we look at is the job's irrelevant to what we're looking at. Because what we're looking at is how do we get a group of people to function as well as they can together. And then we layer the job on top of that. So in reality, we've always spoken to the club. In sports teams, it's quite clearly defined. You have coaches and you have players. Now, the role of a coach is to upskill the player on the job, right? To make me better at tackling, to better at passing, to understand where I need to be on the pitch. That's the role of the coach. But everything else is then on the player. How do I interact with the rest of my team? How do I build social connection? How do I actually have the right conversations? How do I challenge? How do I these things? And that's the function of the team. That's it. So when we look at teams in any walk of life, it's the same dynamic, whereby it's on the management team and the leadership team. A huge portion of what they do, their job description, is managing you, is upskilling you. So, but how do we get the team to function, right? And that's at all levels, up, down, left and right, the whole shebang. So the way we do that, why we pull ourselves away from the typical consultancy is our tagline, if you like. We use the power of incredible real life experiences to drive change. Our view on it is very much that it's human nature, right? Since the dawn of mankind, we've told stories. So if I've gone out to the river to go hunt for food and I've seen a lion there, the way I tell the rest of my tribe about being careful when you got out, I tell them the story about when I went out and I saw this and this. And so it's kind of in our code that's how we express kind of learning. So that's what we do with the business. So let's say, for example, we've had clients that have gone through massive kind of headcount reductions. They've got a new global strategy, all these things that businesses go through. What we do is go, okay, let's actually look at fundamentally, what are you dealing with? So a headcount reduction fundamentally is dealing with change, right? It's managing adversity. That's at the core of what we're trying to look at. So what we do is we go and find a story or an incredible real life experience that fundamentally is about managing a change or dealing with an adversity, but not just dealing with it, being better because of it than they would have been without it. So this person comes in, tells their story. The group get all the good endorphins, all the good stuff you get from hearing these amazing people. Then what we do is go, right, let's take this individual out of the story now. Let's almost take the story out of the story. Let's look at the language they use, the principles, the tools, the way they trained, the way they prepared, because they don't own any of that. So how do we reframe, repackage, reapply that in your team to help you manage the change you're going through or the challenge you're going through, whatever it is? So it's kind of taking this model of, we've all heard inspirational speakers and motivational speakers at company conferences or events, whatever it is. And we go home and we tell our partners, our kids, our friends, cracking out, and oh, Craig, he was amazing, his story's insane, blah, 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 blah. We go to bed, we wake up next morning, nothing changes. Right? Our lives are not changed at all by what we've heard. Yet there's so much there that could change us. By definition, they're inspiration, motivation. There's so much content there that we could use, but we don't. So what we're saying is, well, let's use that. So let's bring the speaker in, hear their story, and what we do is form that bridge between the story and the group and the context. So, we very much start in the world of the story, but we end exclusively in the world of the client, but using the language and all those key learnings, applying in their sector. So that's what we do. And I say thematically, we kind of deal with almost all areas of people and culture, change, resilience, communication, leadership, all those kind of generic titles. And then just being able to really bespoke and understanding, well, what is it within that? So we've had people come to us to talk around, we want to be more resilient. We go, okay, that's great, but resilience is such a big word. It means a million and one different things to a million and one different people. So what does that look like in your context? So what is it you've gone through where you need to build resilience? Or maybe you could have been more resilient, or what have you got coming up that, we need to build this kind of group understanding in terms of how we're going to deal with it. And then that's what we then kind of hone in on.
And have you taken what you've learned from sport? Like, did you think, right, what do I want to use exactly from sport, playing in a team as Saracens, and take that into a context of business? I think it's interesting you say you can't understand the exact problem within a company, but you can use a framework to improve the situation.
So we can understand the problem in terms of what the fundamental dynamic is, but in terms of the politics of the office or the nuance of the actual skill of the job itself. Because I've never done that job, so I'm never gonna. Yeah. So obviously I use my experience in a lot of the facilitation. So when we have a speaker, I can then pull out my own analogies and experience, but we don't. To be frank, we don't really use the Saracens story or
right. Yeah.
mine because the reality is, as I say, in the facilitation, I'll sprinkle a few bits in to help the group understand where they're going and be able to see it in another context. But for that kind of core learning thing, actually, we look at experiences that are far more impactful and far more powerful, right? Because as much as I love rugby and I love Saracens, it's given me everything I've got. I suppose in the grander scheme of life, there's stories out there that are much more hard hitting and much more kind of, So that's kind of what we go after. We do a whole work on team dynamics and actually, busting open a lot of these myths around where we think performance actually comes from, and a lot of these assumptions we have around what generates performance within our people. And a lot of these myths and assumptions completely dictate how we build our teams, how we recruit, how we retain. And that's what they are, myths and assumptions. So what we do is use sport more generally, which rugby is an element of it, but use sport more generally to highlight, well, actually, when finance is the same, when talent is the same, why are some teams still consistently able to outperform other teams when everything's the same? What is that difference? And that difference is, is the dynamics of the team. It's the social connection. It's the understanding. It's all these bits, but they take time, which is why no teams do it. So it's a great thing with Warren Buffett when he's at a conference telling the audience how he made his fortune, and a young guy comes up and says, I'm always really surprised why you're so open with telling everyone your secrets. He goes, well, because this took me 50 years. You want to get rich tomorrow, so I know you're never going to do it. And the reality of kind of team performance is the same concept, is that it takes a huge amount of time, but people don't want that time, right? I need to be good tomorrow. Like, we need to hit this number by the end of the week. Like, we don't have a year, 2 years to build it, but we know for the research that's kind of how long it takes. So yeah, so from that point, we that is predominantly on sport, that kind of, and then looking at research and data and all that kind of stuff. The reality is, it is finding the most appropriate, incredible real life experience that fits the need of the people that we're working with. And that could be rugby, it could be something completely different. It could, this is it, right? Because not only has it got to kind of have at the core the same fundamental dynamic that the client's dealing with, it's also got to be relatable to them. You know, and if it's not relatable, then they don't hear it, and they don't hear it, we don't learn from it. So so we've got a number of kind of speakers that we use that I say thematically kind of hit most areas, and then if we get a left field group that's dealing with something that we don't, we then go out and kind of find the relevant story to tackle that need.
And the foundation, tell me more about the foundation and what you're getting involved with. This is like a
working in prisons, so for offenders and ex-offenders, So when I was playing at the club, as I said, I was injured more than I wasn't. So when you're injured, you're kind of, you're encouraged to go and spend time in other areas of the organisation. So the club had a foundation which ran numerous projects for people around kind of the North London area. And one of the projects they ran was a programme in Feltham Young Offenders Institute, so a prison for 18 to 21-year-olds. And so I was invited to go along and see what they were doing, and it just completely changed my whole worldview. To be honest with you, I grew up in kind of your archetypal white middle class upbringing, and I had the best upbringing anyone could ever ask for, and I have the most amazing family. But because of that, there was a side of society that I obviously didn't get exposed to. And when you go in and you speak to some of these kids and you understand their upbringings and what they've been through, and when I talk about incredible real life experiences, I mean, for me, there's people there have some incredible real life experiences that you only ever see on TV, in soaps or in movies. Like, it's just bananas. And then you kind of look at that and you go, well, you didn't really have a crack at this, did you? If you've grown up in a family that's only ever been in gangs, and your moral compass is so warped because of your own, lack of opportunity and the circumstances you're born into, it's like
not many other ways to go for that.
No, this is it, dude. Like, just almost from the point of conception, a lot of these people, I'm not necessarily one for like destiny or anything like that, but the likelihood of them ending up where they ended up was far greater than it was for me, just purely because I was born into the environment I was born into, and they were born into the one they were born into, and then you start to kind of pick into kind of the prison system and the justice system, and then understand how difficult it is, even if I went to prison and with the amazing family and support network, how difficult it would be for me to break free of that. And you think about people that don't even have that, no wonder. The reoffending rate is 52%. So over half the people in prison have already been in prison. I think at the last count, the social impact it had on our country, it cost our country £24 billion. Right, the rate of reoffending and the costs associated to reoffending and the social impact of it. It's a huge sum of money. And nothing's really been done about it, because the reality is, well, why would we? Type thing. Because this is it. It's out of sight, out of mind. Let's put them all behind a wall and forget about them. But the reality is, the way our system works, whether people like it or not, is that nearly everyone in prison is going to get released, irrespective of their crimes. You have a full life sentence, which then is no release. That's a guaranteed. You then have people that will commit crimes in prison, so they'll extend their sentences, who won't be released. But the majority of people in prison will be released at some point, right? Because that's how our system works. So it's saying, and well, when they get released, they're going to live in your community. They're going to move into your street. They're going to be your neighbour. So would you rather them come out in the same mindset they got them into prison in the first place? Would you rather them come out with this pro-social view on the world and the desire to want to contribute and want to, do better. And everyone's going to say the latter.
Yeah.
So you go, well, how do we do that? And so you have this kind of irony and this huge contradiction in our society where you have people wanting more money for NHS, for police, for public service, 100%. But they also want prisoners to be locked up for longer, to build more prisons, to not spend the time investing in them.
Yeah.
We can't have both, because one costs us £24 billion a year and the other one needs more money, right? So if we can just help reduce that 52%, even by a couple percent, the cost saving is literally millions of pounds, right? So the reason we set up, 9 months into setting up the business, I set the business up, and then a guy called Tommy was kind of our first hire, phenomenal human being. We'd always had this desire to want to do something more with what we're doing. Now, what we're doing was great, obviously, and we love it. But if we think about it, we're not necessarily kind of changing society or, doing anything super impactful. So what if we use our own MO of repackaging, reframing, reapplying stories and do it to ourselves? So how do we repackage, reframe, reapply what we do into a demographic that it could actually have a genuine impact on? And because of my experience of going to Felton with the club, I'd always had this desire to want to do something in that space, because it's a space that needs it more than most. And there's a huge amount of controversy around it and public perception, that and just lack of education, lack of awareness. I experienced that firsthand. I had no education awareness about it, and that's why it had such an impact on me, because I was like, shit, I had no idea.
This is going on every day.
Yeah, this is going on, and these assumptions about who people are that are in prison, right? So we had this thing, so that was what we wanted to do. And then Sam, who's our head of foundation, another incredible person, he'd been working in prisons for a decent amount of time up to that point. I had a conversation with him, ironically, in a prison car park, saying to him, I've got this idea about having this other arm to the organisation, what do you think? And he was just straight on like, yeah, cool, why don't I do that for you? So we kind of got the foundation up and running.
That's an interesting response from him, that he could have been, in theory, he could have just said, if it was the wrong person, he could have been quite negative and going, don't put any effort into that because the system's broken. Do you know what I mean? The fact that he saw it as a positive idea, then he must think, it's going to make a difference. Whereas some people might just think, let's just
don't bother. Yeah, 100%. And as I say, Sam, I've been very fortunate that the team we've kind of built everyone is just fucking stellar. I've been very, very, very fortunate. The people we're working with are so good. But Sam's amazing. So Sam's, all he wants to do is help, right? And he knows the sector. He's worked in prisons for a long time and seen the impact it can have on someone. And all it takes is for one person to be able to go out and not come back as a result of kind of the work you've done with them, to be like, right, there's something in this. And I think that's it. And so that's been going now. So that we set up about a year in. So the business is just over 3 years old. The foundation is just over 2 years old. We had our first fundraising dinner at Lord's about last month, which went phenomenally well. And again, it's more just trying to educate people. We obviously were fortunate to raise a decent whack of money to continue to do what we're doing. But the biggest win was the amount of people that were invited there by a friend or by a boss or whatever it is, who had no idea really what we do, and then go, fuck, I had no idea that those are the stats, right? And then that's actually directly impacted me, because that's my money that's going towards these things. And actually the understanding of, yes, you don't get me wrong, you do get some wrong-uns in prison, obviously, but they're not the people we work with. The people we work with are the ones that are there for hugely environmental and circumstantial reasons. And yes, they've committed a crime. So we're not, if you commit a crime, you deserve to go to prison. You broke the law. But it's understanding how someone got to that point. And by understanding how they got to that point, we can then help them stop doing it again when they get out, and help them show them down. So we have 3 courses we run. We're in 2 prisons at the moment. We've got some amazing employment partners that have taken on some of our beneficiaries through the gate, and the success we've had has been awesome. And it's very much like the same. And the lovely thing, the business and the foundation operate in the same vein, where it's not a numbers game. It's all about, well, we only succeed if we actually create genuine impacts for people, for our clients, and for our beneficiaries. So it's not a case of we put X amount into employment this year, because the chances are 90% of that X are going to be out of that job in a month because it's not the right job for them, because the partnership isn't the right partnership, so then actually we leave them in a worse spot than we found it. So for us, it's actually, well, even if it's only a handful of people, if that handful of people can have meaningful change and, stay out of prison, then that's way more impactful than sending 50 into a job for 45 to come back out and end up back in prison.
That kind of sounds like when you were looking for your career after rugby, you were doing these different, you were trying out different jobs, and you're like, I don't like this, an ex-offender, and then yourself are both looking for that kind of purpose-driven career, aren't you? And there will be ups and downs, and there will be almost a roller coaster of finding the right job.
No, it's right. And to be honest, I hadn't really thought of it like that, but you're right. And Sam talks a lot around, essentially what it is an identity shift is the biggest thing, and how we manage that identity shift. So for the people we work with, it's an identity shift of going into prison in the first place, then it's a massive identity shift of coming out of prison because of public perception, because of the opinion and judgment that's going to be cast upon you. But the same for anyone. And if you change roles, you go from professional sport into a job, like it's the same dynamic. It's a shift in your identity. It's how you manage that.
Well, that's what this podcast is about. It's about how I spoke with a former rugby player about this. How do they deal with this, having the identity of a former rugby player going into a job? And he said, I kind of found that question to be quite difficult. What do you do? How was it for you when you stopped playing for Saracens and then you were known as Will Fraser, former rugby player?
It's well, I think obviously because I was working for the club, it was hugely beneficial, is the reality. So if I wanted people to come and kind of work with the bit of the business I was running, the fact that I'd lived it and I'd been part of it, obviously commercially made, so I milked that cow for all it's worth. My biggest shift was then when I set up 101st. Okay. Because I'd gone from being a former player to then being known for running the consultancy business for Saracens, and then I'm running my own one. So when I ran my own one, again, because of what happened with the club when we first started, there was this huge shift away from that, because I was talking to people and a lot of time they were saying, this is about Saracens because, they've just gone through X. So I had to have this real identity shift away from that to get 101st kind of up and running and off the ground, which was tough because the club had been such a fundamental part of my life and my family's life. So that was difficult. But then the nice thing is then all of a sudden you create this new identity where it becomes Will Fraser, founder of 101st, who also used to play Saracens. And that's really nice because actually I'm at peace now with, I'm nearly 7 years post playing, right? So I've had a lot of time to grieve and to think about things. So that was a huge part of my life. So obviously I don't want to be forgotten for that, but equally I don't want that to be what and to be honest, given my career, it was never going to be what people always knew me for. But the fact that it's kind of 101st and I have that as well is great because it adds an element of credibility to what I'm doing now. But I like the fact that, I've forged this kind of new path and it's exciting. I heard one of my good friends, George Cruz, on a podcast recently, actually kind of talking through a similar thing and saying how, there's obvious difficulties and emotional turmoil you go through when you finish, particularly if it's not on your terms or, if it's not in the way you wanted to. But if you can set yourself up in the right way and you speak to the right people and you get things going, it can actually be a hugely positive part of your life and a hugely exciting part of your journey, whatever that is. And I think for me, that's kind of how it's transpired. As I can be retrospective and reflective on that now. At the time, I didn't do it deliberately in that way, but I think when I look back, it's worked out well and almost entirely because of other people.
And how important is it to have Jackson with you as well? Because obviously there must be that trust of, you were teammates with him from probably a young age and then through Saracens, and now you work with him at the club. How 101st, how important is it to kind of build these relationships then outside of sport?
No, it's amazing. Just fundamentally because we've known each other for so long and we are so close. It's just awesome to be able to actually, I say when I finished, what you realise is how unsociable a professional sporting schedule is. It's kind of like, and I was very lucky that I had amazing friends outside of rugby that kept in contact with me because I was terrible at keeping in contact with them. So, when I'm working, they got days off. When they got days off, I'm working type thing. So it's always very hard to socialise. And when I finished, that was probably the hardest thing I found, was the fact that I wasn't able to see the lads anywhere near as much as I wanted to because of that reason, because suddenly our schedule's completely out of sync. And there's loads of research in terms of, from a connection point of view, that's the biggest, one of the biggest things that kills it, purely just schedules and when, the feasibility of stuff. So, but we always kept in contact and obviously saw each other when we could. So the fact that now Jacko's finished and, he's doing a number of other things as well as working for us, but, we can see each other every week. We speak every day, and that's great. But what it also gives us is all the performance gains we had from playing together now find themselves in a completely new context where we can have conversations with each other about work that I probably couldn't have with you, for example, because we don't have that level of, experience and shared understanding. And he can say stuff to me that maybe other people can't because of that as well, in terms of challenging me and saying, is that really the right thing we should be doing? And all that kind of stuff. So it's great, man. Like it's awesome. But the nice thing is, when I look at the, the 5 other people we got in the team, soon to be 6, we're building that as a group now, which is epic. And again, it's just creating this environment, basically trying to create an environment that gives me the same sense of feeling I got when I was playing. An environment where actually I genuinely care about the people I work with and they care about me. They can challenge me and call me out on any bullshit and vice versa. We're all on the same page. We're all trying to get into this thing that's a bit bigger than us and is more powerful. So that's been the thing.
I mean, that must be important in business. I mean, there must be a lot of businesses being run where people want to say something that might ruffle a few feathers, but they won't because
100%.
And if you have that trust to say that, and if you have that trust to take criticism as well, then there's only one way. The business is going to go in the right direction as long as the choice is obviously the right one.
This is it, and this is one of the biggest ways teams miss out on kind of their full, I hate saying full potential because it's such like a wanky LinkedIn thing, but on reaching the heights that they can because of this fear of sticking your hand up in a meeting going, I don't agree with that, or saying, I have no idea what you just said, can you explain it again? And you get this kind of willful blindness, or people, we call it bullshit productions, you give a socially desirable answer to something which isn't what you think at all. It's I'm saying what I think you want to hear as opposed to what I actually think. And then I learn nothing, right? So I then go crack on with Karen and doing exactly what I was doing, whereas you think I'm doing this whole new thing. 6 months later and nothing's changed. You go, well, what the hell happened, Will? And I'm like, oh God, how many times do you see it, these teams where the CEO or whatever will say, we're going down this road and we're doing this new strategy or whatever, and no one says anything. But someone sat there thinking, this isn't working. Like, I've experienced this in a previous job or whatever, like, this isn't going to work. It says nothing. Lo and behold, 6 months later, it doesn't work. And we've wasted loads of time, loads of money, this, that, and the other. And then the person goes, it was funny because in that meeting, when you mentioned it, I didn't think it was going to turn out well. And they go, why the fuck didn't you tell me? Like, we could have saved 6 months of, But the reason is because if I say that, there's a massive fear of what's coming back, right? A fear of judgment, of, the opinion. Do I potentially hamper my promotion chances if I'm questioning the boss and what I'm saying? So, and it's because the space there isn't safe, right? There's no understanding what the intent is as to why I'm saying these things or, being able to view things objectively. So, but this is the thing, let's go back to the very start, why the job is irrelevant. Because this has nothing to do with the job at all. It's nothing to do with what the company does as an end product. It's only to do with this group of people and how the people function together. And already, and well done for bringing it out, but already you can see the performance benefits you get if you can just get this snowball rolling, and the ability it then has for you to perform better as a group.
What inspired you to go down this sector? I mean, where did you see something similar to this where you thought, oh, I could do that? Or was it just this whole idea of the story being a kind of a vessel to creating difference?
So the Saracens consultancy was exactly that, right? It was telling a story of how a club went from being pretty poor to pretty good, and the learnings and how that can be kind of used elsewhere. So that kind of showed me that there was value in it, but also how limited that side was compared to what it could be. Right. And what that showed me is, one, as you can tell, I can talk for England. So like the delivery of these things I really enjoy, because again, it gives me that social interaction that I spoke about that I had when I was playing, the ability to meet new people, learn different things about, and every group you work with, I learn something because it's a different industry, or if it's a different dynamic or a different challenge. So it just kind of equips me more with every session. So I saw that, and then also where I do go back to my experience of the team I played in, our success was fundamentally built not on the rugby. You know, it was built on the group of people we had and our ability to leverage the relationships from a performance point of view, and really eke out as much as we could out of each other because of the ability, how well we knew each other, and we had this shared understanding and shared knowledge and transactive memory and all that stuff. And then what that then manifests itself in rugby, in our ability to play well. And I kind of look at that, and I definitely have a huge sense of ignorance to the business world, but I think it massively plays in my benefit, in the fact that I've not worked for big corporate companies. I've not got any bias. I've not got any bad experiences. I've not been kind of institutionalized in any way. So I come into these things very objective and very kind of able to kind of, I'd say, take the job out of the equation and look at it and help the group understand the dynamics of that they're going through. And the nice thing is, as well, is I'm not, again, people find it strange that I say this, but I'm not like trained in this in any way. I've done the exec coaching course, but that's it. I'm not qualified. I'm not. But again, I think it's to my benefit, or to our benefit as a business, because again, we're not distracted by anything. And what it allows us to do is kind of say, well, listen, everything you come out with today, none of that has come from my mouth. All I've done is I've challenged you, and I've questioned, and I've structured conversations, and I've structured work.
I was kind of mediating a little bit.
Yeah, it was facilitate, right? All we do is the person comes in the morning to tell their story. They're kind of done and dusted within 90 minutes, and then they're gone. The rest of the day isn't us facilitating, okay, how do we work that into this scenario that you're going through, into this context? That's all we do, is we just workshop it in, we facilitate it in. Everything that comes out of that is the group, to how we structure it and how we run that process, which is great, because the last thing these organisations want is some fella who used to chuck a ball around for a living coming in and telling them how to do their job, right? Yeah. You're going to get told that you're not going to get that job again, because, so that's not, we don't do that. And we're very clear that we don't do that. Everything is them, because as I said at the start, I can't do that. I've never worked for your company. It'll be unbelievably patronising of me and unbelievably management consultative of me to do that, right? Which is not who we are, not what we do. So it's cool, yes. And I think that's been a nice reason, one of the reasons as to why, kind of touch wood, things have gone quite well so far.
Thanks to Will Fraser. All the information for his company, 101st, is in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and you'll be notified when new episodes come out.